Hey guys, welcome to the Fox and Burger podcast, where we bring you closer to the Asian side of the furry fandom, one episode at a time. I'm your co-host Fox.
And I'm Burger.
And in this episode, we're gonna quote-unquote stay in Taiwan, because this week we've got Pukan, a Thai fur now living and studying in Taiwan. So Pukan has been a furry since 2010, a venerable 11 years. He started working for Thaitails staff in 2018, and now he's studying and working on his master's in Taiwan. In this episode, we're going to be talking about his experience as a Thaitails staff member to better understand Thaitails from a different angle, as well as how furry is viewed in Thailand. So without further ado, let's give him a big awoo.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm Pukan.
Yeah, thanks so much for being on the show, Pukan. I know that ever since that we both landed in Taiwan, I don't think we've met each other yet in person. Same thing for like Burger. I think like all three of us have not met in person just yet, though I have met Burger. I do solo you a bowl of ramen, so don't let me forget about that.
Sure. I'll take note of that.
Well, we all did sort of meet each other, maybe not directly as a group, but we all did meet each other at Furmit, yeah.
I remember I saw the back of Pukan as he walked away from me, and then that was it.
Well, I was lucky enough to sit next to him during opening ceremonies.
Awesome. Wow. With the legend in person. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our introduction then. As always, Pukan, briefly tell us what your persona is and how you joined the fandom.
Okay, sure. So, my persona is apparently is a Thai Bangao dog with a very bright cotton candy color schemes, I would say. Yeah, like that would be like the description that everyone would agree on for me. Yeah. And how do I join a fandom, right?
Right.
It would be more of like starting from like a lurking perspective, I guess. I think for me it's not starting because of those like I heard every people, like most of our people would like have like their first crush on anthropomorphic character, let's say it's like Lion King or something like that. But for me it's growing from like one of a very old Japanese anime that called Monster Farm. I think like maybe some of the listener would be like heard of it before, but it's like a really, really old Japanese anime that featuring like a talking animal. I'm not sure like what animal is that, but it's kind of like awakens something deep inside of me. So yeah, that would be like how I joined the fandom mentally. But in physically, to keep it short, it's more like in Thailand, like way back then, there's a web board. Like in the year like 2012. Back then it's like a web board era that everything have like a web board for it. And in Thailand we do have a web board called Kemo Dungeon. The Kemo word itself is referring to the kemono, which is like the word that there was like Japanese fandom called the furry. And we do have the web board called Kemo Dungeon, which is like Thai small furry community group. And that pretty much like how do I start enjoying the fandom in Thailand.
Yeah, I myself am not too familiar with Monster Farm, but I'll definitely have to check that out later.
Sure.
I think that that sounds kind of interesting.
I actually was introduced to Monster Farm by a Brazilian furry friend, and it is not that old. It came out in like year 2000, 1999.
Oh.
Man, just hearing things being called old when they came out when I was growing up is just... Anyway.
Time flies.
Time flies.
So let's go ahead and jump into section 2 now. This is what we call the guest spotlight, and we brought you on to talk a little bit more about Thaitails. So firstly, what was your role at Thaitails? Like, what did you do exactly?
I would divide my role into 2 years. So I started helping Thaitail teams in 2018. In 2018, I was helping only on the website page. Because before that, they have like the people that handle the website. But then they kind of like, the con was growing, obviously. And they want to find like more people to handle those like information or something like that. So I was called in to build a website for them, doing like information management and everything. And for 2019, I was helping on a bigger perspective. To put it simple, it's like more like a management side on how like the event was like going, the planning and everything. I mean, like it's more like working alongside with Kiyoshi on the aspect of like events plannings and management, something like that. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much explained like the role in Thaitails. So yeah, 2018 is website. It's like I making a website. 2019 is more like I working alongside with Kiyoshi on management and event planning. Yeah.
So then, can you give us some details on how Thaitails is run? For example, is it like a central committee deciding on important decisions, or is it more like a con chair that makes all the decisions?
For Thaitails, I would say it's like a mix of both. Because like the thing is that Thaitails, despite that we have like quite a number of attendees, the staff team itself is pretty small. And for the most part, like I wouldn't divide it. We just have like one staff team that they're working on it, and eventually we would be more like asking for volunteer to help us on the main day. But when it comes to decision making, as you ask, I would say most of the time it's more like a committee that we just like running an idea through everyone. Just like, hey, like if you want to do this, like how do you guide things and something like that. So like we pretty much brainstorming on it, but at the same time, because not everyone was coming in as like a volunteer, and everyone have their own like personal business that need to handle. So some decision that would be like smaller decision that didn't affecting the entire con, maybe let's say it's like some design, like hey, like do you like poster A or poster B, something like that, that would be running through a smaller group of people. But it's not like it's not that smaller group of people mean like those are like the committee or anything. It's just more like the people that have more time to actively working on the con. But at the same time, we still have like the larger part of the staff that supporting the operation and everything.
So just to kind of like maybe to give us a little bit of insights to the numbers, then maybe like in a ratio, I was just kind of curious about like how many staff members do you have versus like how many volunteers do you have? Let's just say for like Thaitails 2019, the latest Thaitails.
The latest Thaitails,
if you have the information.
The number of staff that we are working on is around like 16. Like 16 to 17 staff. But this is like the core staff. And the thing is, we didn't get to recruit more volunteer at a time. So it's more like we have like 16 staff handling the entire con. And we have like a few volunteer, like a very, very few volunteer. So let's say it's more like 16, 17 people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So at least for that year, Thaitails was like almost like 50-50, I guess, like 50 core staff, 50 volunteers, or somewhere close to that ratio.
I would say it's more like 80% staff and 20% volunteer.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had another question then, continuing on with Thaitails, of course, that I first want to say that I went to Thaitails in 2018 and 2019. Shout out to Thaitails, of course. I think you guys have a great con. And one thing I noticed between those 2 years was the growth, actually. And I noticed that you guys changed hotels from 2018 to 2019. Matter of fact, I think in 2017 it was different as well. I'm just gonna kind of read off some numbers from WikiFur, and feel free to correct me on this if this information is incorrect. The attendee count for Thaitails in 2016 was 125, and then it was 154 in 2017. And then 234 2018, and finally 385 in 2019. And 2019 is the last con, of course. So it was the last iteration before COVID. And so my kind of question here then, kind of like a bigger macro question is, what do you think accounts for that growth?
If you ask me, then it's just more like I will answer based from my personal opinion. Therefore, it wouldn't be like 100% true, but I feel like most part is because Thai people are kind of like more outgoing at the time. That we kind of like, how to say, we kind of like starting to establish like the international, like the foreign connection with the others. So let's say like during those times, there's like Kiyoshi and others that's kind of like outgoing to like the foreigner cons, and we have a really good relationship with those like furries from Japan and Taiwan as well. Yeah. So it's kind of like the time that our local furs was also like in the face of like they going out to like meeting people and stuff, and they kind of like hey, like we do have like our local con, like you guys want to like come visit, you can like visit Thailand, and also like dropping by for Thaitails and everything.
If I can cut in, like how hard would you say you guys, like how hard did you guys market the events to kind of like get the word out that hey, we finally have a FurCon in Thailand?
I will say it pretty not that big. Because like the main focus of like Thaitail, it would be kind of like making the local attendees to like feeling a bit better about like attending this convention. Because like the concept of to go a bit off topic is more like the concept of like furry convention to Thai people is still a bit new, I would say, even though Thaitail exists for like many years, but those time before is like Thaitail is more like a gathering event, I would say. And then like for the few last year, like two to three last time that we making it, we kind of like upscaling it to the convention scale. And when it comes to the convention scale, it's still a bit a strange idea of like people gathering in such a large event to meet up over some kind of like interesting over an anthropomorphic character, something like that. So we didn't do much PR to like the foreigner that like, hey, like we have like Thailand con come over, but we do a lot of PR to like the local fur that like, hey, we have like the place for you guys that like you can come out and shoot, something like that. But the foreigner is more like they coming from like word to word, I would say. People keep telling each other like, hey, like there's a Thai con, come over, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically it was networking with other countries' furries, getting them interested while also getting the locals excited for your event, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. What do you think makes Thaitails stand out? Is there something that Thaitails has or does that other conventions don't? Or is it simply the fact that it's more about having a con in Thailand, something that most people would view as an exotic country?
That's an interesting question. For me, I would say that Thaitail, the charm of Thaitail that we still have, and also like any other like small size con in our like neighboring country have, is that the reason mainly is because it's small. And for me, I would say that's like, I wouldn't say like more wholesome, but it's more like more connected kind of feeling, that you feel like everyone that walking in the space around you is like you can relate it, or you can like connecting to them. But at the same time, when the con is like growing larger and larger, it's more about like individual group of people coming to the common space rather than everyone is the same level of attendees. The reason why people still keep coming to Thaitail because I would say it's like a small con, because it's a small con, and it's not exist as much as like in like the European or in like the American region. I would say that, I mean, like they still have like a small con, but those kind of like small and close connected con that exists in the country, in like an exotic country that you would say, is something that interesting idea to like the foreign perspective, I would say. It's like they could come in and connect it with the local furs more closer, because it's a small size con. Yeah. We have a lot of locals, and you can come in and like kind of like connecting, shielding with furries, the people that have same interests as you, but in the other part of the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Something like that. Yeah.
I definitely think that there are like, foreigners who would be interested in that. And I think me and Berger are probably examples of that, where it would be really cool to go to a con outside the US to kind of get to know Asian furries a lot more. And I think Thaitails, again, I've been there 2 times. I really think it really offers that.
Yeah.
That is definitely the feeling that I got when I went to like Furmid and Furpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Moreover than that, I think Thailand is still like the place that many people kind of like want to like visit, I guess. So it's kind of like combining on the fact that like, hey, there's a furry community in Thailand, and you can also visit Thailand after you visit the furry convention, and it's kind of like double. Yeah, it's like double the bonus. Like, yeah, it's like, oh, you can travel in Thailand, but also there's a furry there. As a furry that living in like the States, I think like that combination of word kind of like excited of it. Like, you can visit Thailand, but also there's a furry. Yeah.
And I think you guys do such a good job at like being great hosts. This is to kind of maybe like overuse the phrase, this is the land of like 1 million smiles. And so I think like there's so much like hospitality coming from Thai furries. And matter of fact, I almost feel like we interviewed more Thai furries on this show than any other furries. Because we had Polar, we had Kyochi, we had Alder, now we have you. We've quote unquote we've been to Thailand like I don't know 2 or 3 times by now, and I don't know, like maybe there's a reason for that. You guys have been so friendly and so hospitable. And I know when I went to Thaitails, it was just exactly as you said, where there's like you can have Thai furries who offer rides, who might even pick you up at the airport, who might show you around Bangkok after the con or even before the con. And so, you know, like I really wish COVID wasn't happening right now. Otherwise, like I would definitely put Thaitails again on my list.
Definitely. I also wish that I can like go back to Thailand as well. Yeah.
I want to move on and kind of wrap up this section though, and
Sure.
ask the last question for section 2. This is going to be more of a personal question. What would you say was your most favorable or memorable experience at Thaitails then?
For me personally, I would say that it's a bit of a bias though, but it for me it would be
That's fine. Yeah.
room party. I would say.
Hmm.
Kind of like, I mean, I would say like if you counting like only on the con floor experience, I would say after party. But if you including everything, I would say room party. The reason why is that is because like the room party is like the place that you kind of like sit down and revise and everything. Kind of like looking back at what you have done for like the past 2 days and everything. And it's I mean, like, to be specific, it's gonna be like after con.
It's like a
room
time
party.
to reflect or look back or
Yeah. It's kind of like you live the best moment. I would say like the entire con is like, yeah, it's like there's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's hardship and everything. It have like goods up and down and everything. But when you sit in the after con room party, is where you reflect. Yeah, the word is like reflecting itself, reflecting the experience and everything, and get to talk with the other people that might not coming from like the same country as you, or maybe like they coming from like the other half of the world, and to get to share those like perspective and everything, and would be able to talking deeper into like those thoughts and conversation is like the best moment for me.
Absolutely.
That like yeah,
I think we're on the same page there. I definitely love room parties, and I don't think I remember talking to you at the 2019 room party, but I basically agree with almost everything you said.
Yes. To add a bit more on that is, I would say that furry convention on everything is that people usually have like the outsider perspective would be like people coming to do furry stuff in the furry convention. But the magical part about like the furry fandom is that the furry is just like the overhead for a group of people. We just come in the name of furries. But when we come when we come into the furry convention, the thing we talk is just, we talk like a normal people would do. We talk like technology, we talk science, we talk pretty much everything. And I think that's like the interesting and the most magical part of a furry fandom, that kind of like sum up the whole furry convention definition that, hey, like if you're going to furry convention, it's not just about fursuiting, it's not just about the furry people doing furry things, but it's just more like the chance that you would get to meet a lot of people, a lot of cool people that would someday changing your life, that like you never been on that side before. And I think that would be like sum up my words on this question.
Awesome. Yeah, I thank you so much for telling us more about Thaitails. Again, hopefully the COVID situation will improve in the years to come. Maybe we'll see international travel come back in full. I think now let's go ahead and move on to our section 3, where we compare and contrast fandoms. In this particular section, I want to kind of talk more about how the Thai furry fandom is viewed by the public in Thailand. So let me just ask that. How does the general public view furries? Do they think it's related to cosplay, anime, or mascotting, or is it something else entirely?
That is another interesting question. I just happen to talk about this in my Thai podcast. But the thing that I could recall from talking about that is that Thai people still like embracing furries, or like the definition of furry or anthropomorphic character as like the art style. I would say they're viewing it in more of like a a genre of art, a genre of drawing that like people drawing in furry style, you drawing a furry character, but it's with less of a lifestyle comparing to the other side of the world. There's a lot of people that embracing furry as a lifestyle. Me myself, I could say that like he or she, others was doing the same things. But at the same time, a lot of newcomers that joining the furry fandom, they treat furry as more like an art thing. Like, hey, you drawing furries, nice. You drawing furry comics, cool. You make furry arts, that's great. But they didn't talk about like embracing the concept of like furries, fursona, or talking more deeper into something like alter ego or concept like that. I think that's like the difference, the main difference of like the Thai. I would say that I couldn't compare it to Taiwan or like the other like neighboring country, because each country, even though we're so close, from what I learned is that we have a very different, like a very big different point of view on the furry fandom itself. So I could just like saying, it's just more like it's just for me to note to the viewers or listener that like even though I talking from like the perspective of how Thai people viewing furry fandom, I wouldn't recommend using this as a base to like looking to referencing for like the neighboring country, because it a bit silly, that like we're so close but we're looking on this thing very, very differently. To add a bit more answer to complete the question of like does it related to cosplay, anime, or mascotting, I would say it's pretty differentiated. I mean, like fursuiting could count as mascotting or cosplaying at some time, but people that invested deeply into to the point that they're making a fursuit is usually they're like, how to say, they're more like emotionally invested in the character that they make a fursuit out of it. Therefore, they didn't actually treating fursuiting as same as cosplaying or mascotting. Something like that. Also, like the concept of mascotting is, I wouldn't say new, but more like not something that generalized in the system. Like some school have mascots, some university have a mascot, but it's not like every school's sport team has a mascot. That's something that's the same as like in the US or something like that. So the concept of mascotting is not that big. Cosplaying could be, maybe, or something like that. Anime, I'm not so sure. Some people get dragged in because of furries, like some anime dragging them into a furry fandom. That I think that's pretty much.
So then, sticking with the topic of fursuiting, how does fursuiting in public work? How is it viewed? Is it easy to do? Do you need a permit or a permission? And how do onlookers generally feel about fursuiters?
In most cases, if you're doing fursuiting, if you're doing in like a public space, it treated as like a private photography shoot. Therefore, you need to request a permit for it. Kind of like if you're going into the park, some park is like, no matter it's I mean, it's not counting as like because you're fursuiting, therefore you need a permission, but it's more like because you're doing a photo shoot, you need a permission for it. But I cannot really recalling fursuiting in public without taking a photo. So I would say that's like, yes, you do need a permit to fursuiting, but it's more like you fursuiting for photographing or like taking a video or something like that. In most places, you need to do that. Like you need to ask for like the security and everything, but mainly it's more like a security reason. That's kind of like because you're doing a photo shoot, therefore you're gonna be like blocking the pathway for people walking, yada yada yada. So like kind of like you just need to tell them that like, hey, we gotta take a photo here. Like this is like we're doing some this and that to just let them know what's going on. And when you fursuiting in public, I will say that I couldn't completely answer this on my behalf because I never actually get to fursuiting in public in Thailand before. My fursuit came to me in Taiwan. So like I couldn't like explain like in full detail. But from what I heard and from what I from people talking about it, is pretty positive. Like it's pretty much just people just view it as like cosplaying, like, oh, like, hey, that's a cute character. Some of them might ask like what anime or what cartoon are you from, but no, it's not. It's a original character persona, something like that. But yeah, I think Thai people perceive well with the concept of like the mascots and everything. There's sometimes gonna be like people with bad manner that kind of like treat fursuiting poorly, I would say, but that's like a pretty rare case. It's not like outright like just like going and like hating you or something like that. But I would say that in a sense, because of like the internet culture and everything, that kind of like tainted the view of how general public, like those like netizens general public views toward the topic of furries. We might got like sometime people just kind of like viewing furry as something that's kind of like weird. Therefore, when it comes to fursuiting, it's kind of like applying the same idea that, oh, it's fursuiting. Fursuiting is furry. Then fursuiting equal weird. Something like that. It happens sometimes, but it's not like always. And people are pretty welcoming of it now, I guess. Like it's kind of like changing like a bit over time. A bit by bit over the time. Yeah.
That's always good that public outlook can kind of fluctuate, but in the positive direction. It seems to be doing that in the US over the past couple of years. You know, once news stations have stopped doing their whole shock factor news of like, furries are pedophiles, you know, something like that, or whatever disparaging things they like to say. But anyway, on a somewhat different topic, can you briefly tell us about how Thailand views the LGBTQ community and maybe how that would apply to the Thai furry fandom? Is there kind of a link between those two sub-communities? Because over in the West, especially in the United States, there's a very big crossover between LGBTQ and furry. So is that similar in Thailand?
I would say that like so far not so much. As I mean, like recalling to like the question that asking about like the public view of furries, people mostly still view furry as like the art, kind of like the category of art. Therefore, there's a lot of people that they are already in an LGBTQ community, and they're also like being a part of a furry fandom. But to say that it's like there's no like a big link that like, hey, we are furries, so we're supporting LGBTQ. The reason why is because like I would say like in Thailand itself, the diversity of like gender spectrum exists in the Thai furry fandom is pretty diverse. We have like many group of people in the furry fandom. And to say that's like in Thailand itself, when it comes to LGBTQIA topic, the thing is that people kind of like partially accepted it. It's more like we don't downright hate people that coming from like the LGBTQ community, but it's more like we accepting them as long as they don't associate it with us. But by us, it didn't mean me. It mean like the people that like the general public. The year past, there's like we have like a lot of like movement that kind of like, hey, LGBTQ is normal, LGBTQ is fine. But since the LGBTQ kind of like, I wouldn't say like against the rules of the religion. On the side fact, it's like Thailand is like mainly Buddhism, and somewhere in Buddhism they're kind of like, hey, like those LGBTQ people is not allowing into like participating in some of like religious activity, or they are related to like their past life having something like that. So it's kind of like, I would say like those old people, like the people that kind of like a bit old, like relative old, like above like 50, they have like that point of idea that like, oh, those LGBTQ people are kind of like doing something bad in their past life, therefore they're born like this, something like that. And and but then again, it's not like we have like straight up like, oh, it's how to say, it's not like we are like so outgoing as like the Western scene that we have like a pride parade and everything, and they're just kind of like enjoying us being low-key LGBTQ. So they was like, oh, I mean, it's cool. If you ask like most parents or like most people in Thailand, like the old people, they will be like, hey, yeah, I mean, we're cool with LGBTQ as long as those LGBTQ people is not our children. Something like that. Like, yeah, we're cool with LGBTQ people on the street, we're cool with them on the television, but if they're my son, that my son is gonna be getting banned, something like that, which is pretty ironic, I would say. But that somehow is way better from what we used to have, from what we used to be.
I want to cut in real quick and say that, you're kind of getting into a question I was already going to ask, so I kind of want to roll with that since we're already like getting into this topic. So what I wanted to say was that, well, again, you're hitting the nail on the head as to where I was trying to get at, where it's like, okay, like what is the intersection between this sort of like traditional conservative Thai culture and the furry fandom? Because in my opinion, furry is something that originates in the West, and it kind of comes from a more like expressionist, inclusive, open kind of mindset or philosophy. And so again, you're kind of already hitting a lot of the notes to my question, but to kind of maybe rephrase my question then. So do you see that the Thai public being, I would say, like more and more open to the LGBT community?
The thing is like this, like to go back a bit in your question, that you're taking that like the furry fandom is something that coming from the West. Apparently, in my feeling, is like, I mean, it's originated in the West, but when it comes to Japan, it becoming the thing like more like a Eastern size like kimono thing, and Thai people kind of like adopting the idea of Japanese furry version into the fandom. So I would say that like the expressionist kind of behavior that you kind of like mentioned about is actually not that like exists in the community so much. Therefore, there's like the community is still like more like a sanctuary for people to just like come in and chew, but people are not like really like that expressive of like, hey, I am a furry, something like that. We didn't like adopt the idea of being open and like expressionist mindset from the West, sadly. So it's just more like we're just being furry. We just chill here.
So I mean expressionist here, not as in like telling people, but more like being able to like be yourself. Really, that's what it means. So to kind of like clarify, it's like what I mean by expression is like you can be yourself at the sanctuary. That's kind of what I meant.
I still say not so much. Speaking from like the Asian born perspective, is that we are not like raised to be expressionist. Kind of like, because like you Asian and you kind of like need to like follow your dad footstep or like doing something that the old people already did, you're not so much allowed to be yourself. Even though in a sanctuary, there's a lot of people that kind of like get used to like being more themselves, kind of like expressing more of like, hey, proudly being a furry even in a sanctuary space. I mean, like, just the people like that. I mean, one prime example is like maybe like Kiyoshi or others that like also already featuring in the episodes. And I would say like I coming from the side that kind of like slowly being expressionist within like the sanctuary that creating, explaining more for the new people that just joining the fandom for like a recent years. I would say they're not so much like in terms of like expression, like proud to being themselves, even though they are doing it in a safe space that they are allowed to do so.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're understanding my words. Yeah, I think you kind of misunderstood a little bit earlier, but I think I got you now. Okay, that's totally fine. Okay. And then is there anything more you want to add like related to that question, or
to kind of like sum up is that to say it's like this, like in Thai people viewing to the Thai furry fandom in general is more like we are more open to LGBTQ community. Therefore, a lot of LGBTQ people are feeling safer to like joining the fandom because they feel like being LGBTQ themselves like exists in like the LGBTQ social space is not as accepted as you coming into like the furry side, which is like a bit weird though. Like, because like, I mean, like talk to scale, LGBTQIA is a lot bigger. There's like a lot more people that being LGBTQ, but not a furry. But funny enough, if you coming joining in like a furry fandom, you coming into like a furry event, you can be more expression. You can be more of yourself as the LGBTQ and also a furry. So I think that like the plus side is that like it's not like directly related that we say that, hey, we are furry and we are proud of being LGBTQIA. I mean, like we never say that out loud. We know we did, but we like never actually said it out loud comparing to like the West side. But a lot of people, like a general public view, knows that Thai furry fandom is very welcoming of like people of genders. And I think like that's like the good thing that we kind of like going through. It's not I don't see it happening like anytime soon that we're gonna like directly combining it together, because like some people that join the furry fandom is still have like a bit, I wouldn't say like hate it, but it's more like they're not to go a bit more, it's more like people are still confusing with the term of like being ally and being one. People still confusing about that term. Therefore there was like, hey, if furry is directly connected to LGBTQ, then a lot of people are gonna see that if I'm a furry, therefore I'm gay. And it's just kind of like more like misconception that a lot of people not clearly understand that. So me as a people that working in Thaitails, working in like a furry event, I don't think that is something that's gonna happen anytime soon, because that's we didn't more like, how to say, we didn't care more so about like the general public idea, but more like how to make the people inside the fandom understand that, hey, even though we are associated with the LGBTQIA, it doesn't mean that if you're a furry also mean you are a gay, something like that. Yeah, I think like that's all I want to add. I'm not sure if it's like confusing.
So the way you describe that situation is a little bit of a reminder of how the bronies, that fandom, when they first started, basically when they entered the public eye, there was this mentality of, well, if you're a brony and you like girly stuff, then you might be gay, or you must be gay. And there is a bit of a pushback from that, just because, well, there is like a conflicting opinion on that. Basically, either I'm not gay, I'm just a brony, or I'm a brony and I just happen to be gay. There's no connection there. But I think the conflict there was more of a gay is bad kind of a thing. Sure. But eventually I think some people grew up and was like, you know, gay is okay, but I'm still not gay just because I'm a brony.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, our last question here is more of a personal question, but of course, so I'd like to ask you as well. Where do you see yourself after graduating with your master's? So I know you're currently doing your master's just like I am here in Taiwan. Do you see yourself residing in Taiwan for a few years, or do you plan on going back to Thailand?
That's like the question that I even myself still asking, like what am I gonna do after I graduating from master. But to ask that, I would say that like my plan for now is gonna be like trying to staying in Taiwan as long as I could. I would say, into the point that like if I'm able to like receiving the APRC, the permanent resident for Taiwan version, I think that would be like my goal for now. Trying to like staying in Taiwan, trying to meet a requirement to obtaining the permanent resident, and because like so far I have been enjoying my time here. To add on that, it's like, it's nice. It's a nice place. People is nice. Places is nice. Society is nice. And yeah. To going back to Thailand though is, I'll just say that it's not so good for now. To like not related to like too much off topic, but I'll just say that like it's not a good choice for now. And I feel like a lot of Thai people do think the same as me, that like it's not in a very good place. So yeah, if related to it, would be more like, yeah, for now, my goal is to trying to stay in Taiwan as long as possible, possibly obtaining the permanent resident. Therefore, the future is uncertain. It could be like anything, and it depends on like which door is opening for me. So hey, who's know? Maybe like I will be access in other country, or do so. Yeah, something like that.
Well, if you do decide to stay in Taiwan and end up staying here with me and Michael, then we would gladly love to have you stay with us and hang out with us here in Taiwan, as well as the rest of the Taiwanese furry fandom, I'm sure. But once again, thank you so much for joining us. You have brought a lot to the table. You've talked about how a small con networks with other countries' furries while getting others excited for its own exotic small con vibes and such. You've talked about the embracing of furry as a lifestyle more than just a art style. You've talked about the differences in the LGBTQA and the furries and the public outlook on that general topic. And I think that's about it. Yeah. So Before you go, can you give us your social media handles? How do you want people to find you on the internet?
Sure. So, if you guys like curious about me and want to like see me more, I do appearing on Twitter's. It's twitter.com/ is Pukan, but to spell it out, it's like Puka and Puka and N and another N, which is it's a bit complicated. I'm pretty sure that like Michael would put the link in the description, right?
Mm-hmm. What about your VR streaming schedule? Where do we find you there?
Oh, also, I'm just starting to live streaming on Twitch. My Twitch is also like going under the same handle. Is twitch.tv/pukan, and you can also like find my streaming schedule on the Twitch channel itself. On the Facebook page, it's facebook.com/pukan PUKANCH Pukan channel. You can also find my streaming schedule and everything over there. And yeah, I would welcome like everyone to like talking about this topic, and I would encourage also to like if you're hearing this episode and you have thing like curious about something that I talk about it, you are more than welcome to like hit me up on any social link and like talk with me more about it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Pukan. This has been the Fox and Burger podcast with me, Burger,
and Fox,
and we will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.